You had me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello. Hello, everybody. It's 5 o'clock on a Friday. And I know we're in the habit of getting out our instrument immediately at 5 p.m. Friday and starting to practice. But hopefully, just delaying that practice time just a little bit to watch Cello Chat is going to give you all the more food for thought and inspiration on just fueling the practice throughout the whole weekend. So I do want to thank this week's sponsor. McLaughlin Violins is the sponsor this week, a wonderful violin shop out of Chicago. Check them out, McLaughlin Violins. Thank you very much. Now, my guest this week is Matthew Turner, the extraordinary improvising cellist. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. You?
I'm doing well too. It's
All right.
it's been a while, but it's
I
always
know.
great to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too.
All right. So for the viewers who don't yet know you, can you tell about yourself and your musical background?
Yeah, sure. Well, right now, maybe I can start now and then move backwards or skip around, I guess. Right now, I teach at Lawrence University in the jazz and improvisational music department. Um, I'm also a pianist, but I would say for the most part these days, cello is my main instrument. Um, and maybe at some point I'll get more into what I do as a teacher, but I can start if we want to go way back. I started on violin actually when I was three and a half into four, and and we're talking about years here, not grades. So 3 years old, and to be brief, it wasn't really for me. Violin was not my it wasn't in my future. So my parents were convincing me to maybe look at piano. I think when I was about 4 or 5, and that didn't work either. And then around 8, I went to my parents and said, "Hey, I really want to play the piano." So I started taking lessons, and then a year later, I started taking private lessons on cello, and then things just kind of took off from there. So I don't know how much detail we want to go into, but uh, I did study a lot of classical cello. So I was learning concerti and sonatas and so forth, um, and studied cello all the way into grad school, classical cello. And except when I was in grad school, I had kind of taken a turn, so to speak, a good turn, um, to focus more on improvisation and jazz and so forth. What's interesting is that from the beginning, I would say fifth grade on, I really started to take off with improvisation as well. And I was really fortunate when I was in middle school, fifth through eighth grade. I was in a string jazz group. My father was the orchestra teacher, and so we're talking mid 70s ish, and so I was really fortunate to have that opportunity to improvise. We did jazz, we did blues, we did Beatles tunes. We made up our own stuff, and so that was just a really great experience. Um, and let's see, I don't know how much more we want to go in depth here, but college, I went to Lawrence University. I was a cello major, but I also studied jazz piano there. And then in grad school, I went to New England Conservatory. I was in the, at that time, third stream studies program, which is now called the Contemporary Improvisation Department.
Excellent, excellent. So I think I met you in 2000, either 2001 or 2006, when we were together on the National String Workshop faculty, and I got to hear you improvise then. And fortunately, was able to apply for a grant to take 10 lessons with you on your approach to improvisation. That was just a wonderful time. So I've gotten to experience it firsthand. But can you tell about your approach to improvisation, which on the one hand is you do, for example, jazz improvisation on the cello, but you also have this original approach whenever you want to do it. You go off into Matt Turner original. I love there's a quote I think from Strings Magazine. Turner dazzles with his own improvisational excursions and displays his expansive cello vocabulary. And you really do. When you have a cello in your hands, you have a vocabulary all your own. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so um, I think you're right. I mean, I play jazz and I play all, different kinds of styles and genres. And then, as you say, I kind of go off into Matt Turner world or what have you. And one of the things that I do as a teacher and a performer is to explore the instrument as much as I can. So that's part of my practicing is in addition to the maintenance and just kind of keeping things, I guess maintaining the technique and so forth and the sound, is exploring the instrument and finding new ways to express myself as a cellist. So it's trying to transcend what we, for lack of a better way, normally perform on the cello. So I'm always encouraging my students to do the same thing. Explore, 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 and then not only in exploring, but can you take those sounds and can you go even deeper with those sounds? Can you dissect those sounds so that you're just continuing to evolve, and it never ends. That's the great thing about this. You find these new sounds and approaches to improvising, and you just continue to develop.
I love that. I love that. Now, I know there are some cello students for whom the ability to not just be limited to our enormous classical repertoire
Mhm.
and to go outside of the bounds is very exciting. But then for some of them, they let it really intimidate them. But you work with schools quite a bit.
Mhm.
You can you talk about your approach whenever you invariably, I'm sure, run across students that just like, oh, please no, and they just get that worse than a deer in the headlights look.
Yeah. With less experienced improvisers, I think it's about keeping it safe. And so there's that trust issue and also keeping things really simple. So there are things that they can do, um, and avoiding competition and so forth. So as I tell my college students if they want to teach this sort of thing too, is to level the playing field. So keeping it so that people can contribute regardless of where they are. So it doesn't matter if they're a beginner, or if there's somebody who's been playing cello for 30 years. Finding that sweet spot where it feels safe and taking it from there. Um, I often talk about in the schools, safety in numbers. So having students improvise together. So maybe instead of one person, there are five people playing at the same time, or it could be cacophony and having an entire orchestra playing, and then whittle it down to uh, five people, and then down to three, and then maybe there's one person who's taking a solo. I think for the most part, young people they might be nervous, but I think they tend to dive in, and once they get their feet wet, they usually don't stop. They just want to keep going with it. So I think this is why it's so important for people to uh, embrace improvisation from the beginning. That's always been my opinion. One of the things that my dad did, not when I was in middle school or high school with him, but after I had graduated, uh, instead of having everybody take the violin or the cello or viola or what have you out of the instrument, out of the case, and here's what we're going to do, here's the bow hold, or here's how you hold the instrument, or it was basically getting in touch with the instrument and exploring it on your own. So the rule was that you can't hurt the instrument. But I think the assignment was to come in with 5 to 10 different sounds and share those in class and then creating improvisation. So I think you can do this from the very beginning. And so improvisation isn't just a separate thing. It's a core in terms of what we learn and how we perform.
Excellent, excellent. So, for you personally, how much would you say that you're exploring, for example, at the piano translates to the next time you improvise at the cello and vice versa? Do they cross-pollinate quite a bit?
A little bit. I think, yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know if anybody's ever asked me that. I think in terms of theory and ear work, they definitely there's definitely crossover there a lot. Um, so because I played more jazz on piano initially, um, my theory chops there translated a lot to the cello. Um, but I think there are times when it goes the other way. I'm just trying to think how that would work. Um, Maybe with sound production, I'm really into sound on the cello.
Yeah,
So finding different colors on the piano, for example, that might be an example of that.
nice, nice. Excellent. Well, now you have an extensive discography, fortunately, so people can explore your playing at considerable lengths. But you also have irons in the fire, things coming up. What
Mm.
are some of your upcoming projects?
Well, the pandemic has kind of put things on hold for me, unfortunately. Yeah, it's been an interesting year. The last time I did any sort of recording project was in France in summer of 2019.
Mm,
Um, yeah, and so right now I don't have any concerts per se that are coming up. Because I'm at Lawrence, I'm sure I'll be playing on some concerts there. But right now I'm taking the traveling to. I'm it's a back seat right now in terms of traveling. That's what I'm trying to say. So the answer is not too much, unfortunately.
yeah. Well, still knowing you're as fascinated as anybody by music as a whole, have you been able to find a silver lining in terms of just like being able to go further in a new direction that you kind of weren't um, hadn't traveled down in your own expanding Matt Turner vocabulary?
Yeah, I don't know in terms of the vocabulary or a different direction, but I would say that because of the pandemic, I definitely practiced more than I had in year in the teaching was difficult, and I taught only remote last year. I did ensembles and private lessons and classes, which was a challenge. But I think that as difficult as it was to get, sit down and practice, I did it every day, and it was really good. In years past, maybe I shouldn't even be admitting this, but because I was so busy with teaching, I didn't get to practice every day. And when you're on the road, especially if those years that I wasn't teaching at Lawrence, it's really hard to practice when you're sitting on an airplane or you're in your car or a train or what have you. Um, so that was one of the really interesting experiences for me with the pandemic was just finding more time to practice. And yeah, I guess that's the main thing.
All right. All right. Well, here's wishing you a return to your full speed ahead as soon as we get to the other side of this.
Yeah, well, you too. Yeah, it's definitely it's a tough time. It's
Yeah,
definitely a tough time.
that
Yeah.
is. All right. Well, thanks so much, Matt. I sure appreciate your time, and it's always great talking with you.
Oh, same here, Benjamin.
All right. Thank you. And thanks again to our sponsors, McLaughlin Violins. And next week, Russell Rowland, a Chicago-based cellist, will be my guest. So you won't want to miss that. All right, thanks everybody, and happy practicing.